Hello and welcome to another episode of Off the Ruck, your weekly rugby breakdown with me, John Ferguson. Yes, the episodes are going to be coming hard and fast right now to you guys on the channel because the Lions tour is upon us. We've had the first game on the weekend, Western Force versus British and Irish Lions. That's what we're going to be doing a quick review for today before we get into the rest of the content for the week, which is going to be coming in subsequent episodes. We'll be doing another release later this afternoon for the preview for the Reds versus the British and Irish Lions on Wednesday, Australian time, and we'll also be doing a review preview of the Waratahs at the weekend, as well as the Wallabies on Sunday. So you have, in a space of 7 or 8 days, you'll have 4 rugby games, all involving Australian sides, all that I'm going to do review previews for. They're going to be longer and shorter previews and formats, but I just want you guys to stay up to date, so don't forget to follow on all the different channels. So I've got Instagram now, so make sure you go and follow me there at off_the_ruck. I know it's a bit hard, but you can make it happen. And then also on TikTok, if that's where you guys find your rugby news. But nonetheless, don't forget to subscribe, guys. There's lots of news coming and there's lots of videos coming. There's lots of content, and it's just one of those times of the year where you're just going to have to be up to date on absolutely everything because news is happening so quickly and big changes are happening quickly. Like just today, we've heard that Taniela Tupou is going to be heading back to the New South Wales Waratahs camp to train for that game on Saturday. So it is really, 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 really hard to keep up to date with everything, but I'm going to do my best to try to keep you guys up to date with all the rugby news happening for the British and Irish Lions tour. And from an Australian perspective, to you guys, if you're watching from overseas, stick along. I will be doing some bar previews and some places that you can get around Sydney to watch your British and Irish Lions if you're just staying in Sydney, or maybe you're in Sydney and Brisbane and you're traveling around, but you want to watch all the games in a good sporting environment. So that'll be coming on the channel a little bit later in the week. But let's just get straight into the Western Force and the British and Irish Lions review, and that's what this video is about. So I think we'll start off by saying that the game was absolutely nowhere near as... The difference between the two teams was nowhere near as big as the stats showed, because the stats were almost even, and the scoreline, 54-7, blew out completely, whereas things like possession, territory, they were shared. Tackle percentages, there was only like 1% difference between tackling at 86% and 85%. The Force actually tackled at a higher percentage, believe it or not. And then there were other things like penalty count, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but the Force actually won the penalty count, conceding fewer than the British and Irish Lions. And that's going to be something key moving on into the rest of the tour. But I think starting off, we'll just have a look at the game shape, and it was really clear that the Lions had a really superior kicking game. The likes of James Lowe, Elliot Daly, who absolutely skyrocketed back into the test team considerations for Andy Farrell, the coach of the Lions, because he had an absolute stellar game of fullback. He did exactly what he needed to do. He covered the backfield well, communicated really well, and made sure that they got really good pay out of his kicks straight down into the Force and pinning them down in their own half, because that, between his breaking left boot and James Lowe, absolute cannon, it becomes really hard to be able to put the ball anywhere but out against the Lions, because they will punish you because they have such good kickers in their setup. So something that the Wallaby contingent, so aka Ben Donaldson and Dylan Peach, really will need to pay attention to and review, because if they get stuck in that situation, which may very well happen, Ben Donaldson may very well happen to play a 15 if he needs to cover an injury at some point, then he and Dylan Peach need to be talking a lot better with whoever that other winger is, because the Lions absolutely had them scrambling to be able to cover the backfield, and they lost that kicking battle 9 times out of 10. So well done to the Lions players there. I thought that the Force were regularly ran out of numbers in defense, and that comes down to because they run a defensive rush system, they either were too far behind and weren't able to get up high enough to stop the ball, or they just simply didn't adjust on the go. And that inability to be able to rethink your strategy when you realize that you are outnumbered and no one's actually going to be able to get up fast enough to be able to break that passing chain was kind of surprising. It was a little bit disappointing because it made the Lions look so much better than they actually are. But a lot of those passing passages were off the back of the Lions players just being fitter and more determined. They always did second efforts. They always chased hard. Someone like Mac Hansen, who didn't have the greatest night overall, was really, really good at doing double efforts and chasing every single kick that he put through with everything that he had, and he got pay out of it a lot of the times, just because he was working harder than his opposite number, or he's working harder than the Western Force players around him, rather, to be able to get to the ball and to be able to really make a nuisance of himself and make his presence felt when he did put those kicks through, or when he just sent through a player through a half gap and then he chased up to either be able to clear the ruck or then also be able to regather and get a second touch. And that was something that really, really stood out amongst the Lions. And I know a lot of people are saying that no, the Lions are going to be able, they're going to consolidate. They're not going to offload as often. They're going to be a lot more structured. That is actually, I don't believe, the case. I think Andy Farrell and his coaching staff have really got this down to a fine margin of a detail, which is that it's going to be really hard to get the group fully cohesive in the short amount of time that you have, especially as you're prepping for game days almost every second day. So, especially in this first part. So, what they're going to be doing now is just relying on the talent that they have in their group to be able to really exploit individual differences between athletes. So you put someone like Sione Tuipulotu with a one-on-one on someone, usually he's going to come out on top, whether he makes the gain line, gets post-contact meters, or puts someone through a gap. Now, if you put him in a system, then you're going to have to rely that everyone around him, whether it's an English player, Welsh player, Irish player, or another Scotsman, knows how to play the way that Andy Farrell wants you to play. But if you give them general structure and you get players running in certain shapes, and then you say, after this, eyes up rugby, do whatever you want, then I really think that the British and Irish Lions are going to come out on top, especially on top of a lot of these provincial teams, because the individual talent and the power that some of these athletes have are far and exceed the Western Force players, at least on Saturday. And that's to be expected. This is the best players and athletes from 4 nations, so that's England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, against a provincial side made up from, local WA players and obviously some people from across to the eastern coast as well of Australia. But nonetheless, that is the mentality that I think that Andy Farrell and his coaching staff really see this as an opportunity to let the players express themselves, but also rely on the extreme depth and elite talent that they have to be able to truly exploit those little half gaps, half moments, and they're good enough, whether it's Finn Russell, whether it's Thomas Williams, whether it's Gary Ringrose or Mac Hansen in the back line, or whether it's Tyg Furlong, Tyg Byrne, Joe McCarthy, or Pierre Schumann in the forwards. They're all going to be good enough, along with Henry Pollock, which is a generational talent, but we'll get on that in a sec. It gives them all enough freedom and liberty to be able to express their true skills and show us the reason why they've been picked. So I think that the offloading will continue, but I think that more pop balls off the deck like Henry Pollock's been doing, and I think also just little shift passes, like little tip-on passes, as opposed to outright out the back, like Len Flicky Tau style. So keep an eye on that, but I do think that this will continue to develop, and I can't see it going out of the game because Andy Farrell it's kind of risk versus reward dichotomy, but I think he's allowing that side of the game to propel the momentum for the team, and then they eventually are going to be able to carry on, and then that momentum will be able to allow them to play a little bit structure for the further and further on top they get of their opposition. So that's really exciting. I think that, again, a quick mention on this, the Western Force didn't look as fit as the Lions, and that was just due to the double efforts. It wasn't like a weight thing. It was just they didn't look as fit. They weren't running as many double efforts. They weren't backing up. When someone made a break, they kind of turned and ambled backwards. The Lions players were running really, really fast. They were chasing absolutely everything, and they were putting a lot more energy on the ball, whether it was the starters or reserves. It doesn't matter how late in the game it got. So that was just a quick note I think that the Wallabies have to watch out for, that they cannot afford to be complacent at any point, and Andy Farrell is going to be able to have this Lions team absolutely ruthless for the entire 80 minutes because there are so many players that want to play in those test matches that they really don't have any excuse not to give their absolute all. And they have a big enough squad to be able to rotate, so they don't have to worry about absolutely exhausting themselves. And Andy Farrell is going to be doing a good job of rotating players during matches and between them as well. If we go into the set piece, well done to Tom Robertson and Brandon Paenga-Amosa, Ollie Hoskins for the Western Force scrum. They were not only good, surprising everyone, including myself, they were dominant in that scrum, and they actually didn't get the penalties I think that they deserved for being that dominant. That's going to send alarm bells to the front row and the scrummaging coach of the British and Irish Lions, because Tyke Furlong, who's one of Ireland's favourite sons, and usually they're starting tight head prop. Obviously, he's had a huge injury layoff, so he's still coming back from that. But nonetheless, you can't really change that form instantaneously when you're coming back from such a large injury as he is. So likewise for Pierre Schumann, the regular starting loosehead prop for Scotland, not particularly impressed there. I thought that he was going to maul Ollie Hoskins, but Ollie Hoskins, who had a broken toe, held his own, and I think it was Tom Robertson who really did his Wallabies match day 23 test match selection bid a really, really solid job, because he was the aggressor, he was the difference maker, and he really was putting the screws on Tyke Furlong. He was playing a loose head, he can play both sides, but nonetheless, I think he's more comfortable at loose head, so I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that matchup between Tyke Furlong and Tom Robertson again. So well done to Throbber, absolutely killed it. I thought that he was really, really impressive. So well done. The line out really worked well as well. Darcy Swain, continual pest, and we knew that he would be at the line out. He did some really, really good ruck and niggle work, as well as some maul operating. The maul stopped, the Western Force defensive maul stopped the Lions dead in their tracks on several occasions. So that they really just couldn't use that as a weapon. And that bodes really well moving into the test series, and particularly against these other provincial sides, because the maul has been a big focus for a lot of the Super Rugby Pacific sides in Australia this year. So really exciting for that. I'm surprised they didn't get a maul try of their own, but then again, there were a couple of misplays on their own maul when they had those opportunities, and they did have some. So that's not to say that the Western Force were not in that game at all. I think already mentioned Tom Robertson. The players that we're going to be highlighting are really, really important from a Lions perspective, but also from a Wallabies perspective. So Dylan Peach, he had the wood over Mac Hansen in that first half, absolutely. He beat every first defender that he had come up against him. He was really good aerially, winning some balls when the kicks went up and also kick restarts. So he was an extremely impressive form, and it looks like he throws himself heavily back into the contention for a Wallabies match day 23 for that first test, because he's going to have a bit of a break now leading up into that game. And it's just going to be really interesting to see how Joe Schmidt really molds that back three, because ultimately that back three is so crucial now that we know the kicking is going to be such a huge asset and power point for the Lions. And whoever Joe Smith picks in his back three have to be able to kick, have to be able to communicate and cover the entire backfield, because they cannot be caught out like the Force were on the weekend. Mac Hansen, he'll be having Dylan Peach-sized nightmares. Thought he was very good. Darcy Swain, former Brumbies teammate, was giving him absolute stick the whole time. That was pretty rough to see, but that's just what you're going to get if you're coming back to Australia as an Australian and being a British and Irish Lions representative. So then we already talked about Tyke Furlong. Sione Tuipulotu and a few of the Scottish players looked a little bit out of sorts, and I think the system just wasn't really speaking to them just yet for a lot of the structured stuff, at least. So it just looked like in the back line, a lot of the Scottish players were throwing passes that were meant for a man that was a metre wider and a metre back. And that just meant that a couple of balls were too hard and people dropped them, or they were far behind them, and so they didn't actually get to their player. So that was a bit disconcerting from a backline fluency perspective. Finn Russell absolutely killed it in the 10 shirt, and I think that he will be the starting 10 for that Wallabies test on July 19. No doubt about that. But I think Sione, he is such a great player, so you just give him half a metre and he'll do what he does best. But nonetheless, he didn't have a particularly impressive night, and nor he carried a lot. I think he carried the most of anyone in the entire evening from both sides. But he just doesn't seem fully comfortable or confident in the systems yet. So maybe that we'll see if Bundy Aki plays at 12 against the Reds or the Waratahs this week. And I think we'll see very quickly what the setup is going to be, because I thought Gary Ringrose was very good defensively. He was kind of kept quiet in it from an attacking perspective, but that was more about the Western Force defensive strategy and their rush, but also obviously because he just had to tip the ball on, and then they got outside the Western Force defensive line. So it wasn't his moment to shine, but he did a lot of work off around the ball. They put people in space, so that was really good. I think then finally we'll go to, for the Lions at least, Henry Pollock. What an absolute generational player. It's so exciting to see him at the start of his career, because he's doing things which we lauded and that we praise Ardie Savea doing as a, extremely highly capped All Black and respected All Black, and obviously former World Player of the Year winner. He's chipping and chasing. He's doing this on the world's biggest stage. It's in front of 46,000 people. He is a back rower, a number 8 at 20 years old, chipping and chasing, doing double efforts, passing, running through a gap, then popping off the deck to then be able to supply his side with multiple tries. He set up 2. He had 2 try assists. They were clean as hell, both of them. And he is also just rough and ready to rumble. His ability to get under the skin of other players, I welcome it. I think it's just good showbiz. It's good entertainment, as long as you back it up and you're not like a tool about it otherwise, which he doesn't seem to be at all. Then you just kind of say play on. And I think it's good for the game, and the rugby needs characters. So bring on more of Henry Pollock. I can't wait to see how he goes. And he has done his bid to play in the match day 23 against the Wallabies on July 19 a world of good. And so he could very much be an irresistible pick in the 23 jersey. Ben Donaldson played well at 15. Quick note on that, but I think it's clear now that picking Harford at 10 was a strange call. I don't think he particularly offered anything marvelous, and Ben Donaldson slotted into first 5 a lot as well. So really, really bizarre choice from Simon Cron. Didn't pay off. And I think that had he had his time again, I think he would have just selected Ben Donaldson at 10, because that's most likely where he'll be playing for the Wallabies again. So why not give him some more minutes there? The final, one of the most important and perhaps the final point is the ruck breakdown penalties that the Lions were conceding, and that the Western Force were able to milk out of the Lions. So Ben O'Keefe, the reason why this is so important is because Ben O'Keefe, who was the referee on Saturday night, is going to be the referee for the first test against the Wallabies for the British and Irish Lions on July 19. So that's why that interpretation of the breakdown, so what was happening was that the British and Irish Lions players were reaching over the breakdown once the cleaner and the sealer for the Western Force had set, and they were reaching over the top of them and putting their hands on the ball, trying to get a pilfer or slow the ball down. And everyone in Australia has played under Ben O'Keefe's refereeing before, so they're very used to him not liking that. He's cutting out of the game. He doesn't want to see players reaching over the ruck once the ruck is dead and to disturb the ball. And so Tyg Byrne, Josh Van der Fleer, Henry Pollock all kept extremely quiet because they were pinged out of this, and eventually Henry Pollock got a yellow card. I thought the yellow card was very harsh for Henry Pollock. That was more about the team's overall discipline, but like I mentioned, they lost their discipline battle, so the British and Irish Lions conceded 9 penalties, the Western Force conceded 10. No, sorry, Western Force conceded 7. Wouldn't have won otherwise. So that was really, really impressive from the Western Force, but I think they probably could have afforded to concede a few more penalties just to slow the ball down, so that probably would have mitigated how many tries and points the British and Irish Lions scored. So Ben O'Keefe, extremely important for that first test because he's going to be officiating the breakdown like that. I think that's going to have to force the British and Irish Lions to change a little bit of their breakdown tactic, particularly for that one. Ben O'Keefe's the only Southern Hemisphere referee that's refereeing any of the tests. The other two, one's from Italy, Piatti, and Amasha Kelly from Georgia. Obviously, they all have different breakdown interpretations from each other, but I think as trends, you can stick to a north-south divide, and Ben O'Keefe as the Southern Hemisphere referee definitely will want a faster ruck. So they're going to have to watch out for that. We'll see how it goes in the game against the Reds. We'll see how it goes against the New South Wales Waratahs this weekend. And we'll just keep an eye on that, because as we progress, we're going to have to be talking more and more about what this test side is going to be looking like against the Wallabies and what the trends are going to be there in the refereeing, in the game style, in the gameplay, and we're going to bring you all of that right here on Off the Ruck. Don't forget that we're partnering with Scrum Bags during this series. So you can hear my voice on there, and you can see their content on this channel on Off the Ruck as well on YouTube. Don't forget to follow me on TikTok and Instagram as well, and I'll put those links in the description below. As always, guys, enjoy your rugby. Reds preview coming out this afternoon. Can't wait. Team's going to be announced in a couple of hours. And I think just remember, hit the notification button, hit the subscriber button. Subscribing doesn't, as long as you have a YouTube account, it's not going to charge you anything. It doesn't cost anything. I know that I've had a few people ask me, how does one subscribe? Because I want to give you money. And I said that that's not how YouTube works. You just got to subscribe, and it costs nothing. It's for free. And you hit the little bell icon down here somewhere, and that notifies you every single time a new video pops up. Because as I said, content is going to be coming hard and fast. You don't want to miss out on the news, views, and issues that we're all going to be covering here on Off the Ruck. So stay tuned, and I can't wait for more rugby. But until then, enjoy your week. Peace.